The crash rang out like thunder. One careless sweep of her dusting cloth against the pedestal, and the black cleaning lady watched in horror as the priceless vase wobbled once, twice, then toppled. Time seemed to slow. The gilded edges and painted dragons spun through the air before smashing against the marble floor. The impact was deafening, shards scattering in every direction, glittering under the chandelier like broken stars. The echo carried through the mansion, silencing the clinking of glasses and the quiet shuffle of staff in nearby rooms. Her breath caught in her throat. She froze, staring at the ruins at her feet. Her hands trembling so violently she nearly dropped the feather duster. The vase had been mentioned often, in hushed tones of reverence. A 15th century treasure from China, its value not just in its artistry but in its history, in the prestige it brought to the Millionaire's collection. Everyone in the house knew its worth, and now, under her care, it was gone. From down the corridor, footsteps approached fast. She heard the gasps of staff before she saw them, the whispers rushing through the air like wildfire. The vase. It's broken. She did it. The words struck her harder than the sound of porcelain shattering. She bent down instinctively, her fingers hovering over the jagged edges of the shards, but she didn't dare touch them. The fragments looked sharp enough to draw blood, and she already felt cut open by the weight of what had just happened. The millionaire's voice boomed before his figure appeared. What happened? His tone wasn't yet rage, but the warning in it made every servant flinch. When he entered the hall, his eyes locked immediately on the mess, then on her. For a moment, silence strangled the space between them. The cleaning lady dropped her gaze, her body stiff with fear. She expected shouting, the kind of thunderous anger that could end her job, her livelihood, maybe even her reputation beyond these walls. She tried to speak, but her mouth felt dry, her voice caught. Finally, she whispered, I was dusting. The excuse sounded flimsy, even to her own ears. Her mind raced to the thought of her children waiting at home, her mother's medicine bills, the rent looming over her. One mistake, one accident, and everything could unravel. The staff lingered at the doorway, their eyes darting nervously between the shards and their employer's face. The millionaire took a step closer, the hard polish of his shoes cracking against the marble. He crouched low, his hand brushing the edge of one shard. The painted detail of a dragon's eye still stared up from the broken piece. His jaw clenched. She braced for the explosion, her heart pounding so loudly it drowned out the world around her. But the explosion didn't come. Not yet. The only sound was the faint drip of water from the vase's shattered base, a final echo of what once held life. She straightened slowly, her chest tight, her dignity struggling against the urge to collapse into tears. She didn't know if she would survive this moment, but she knew one thing. Nothing in the mansion had ever felt heavier than the silence pressing down on her now. The silence after the crash felt like a noose tightening around her. The black cleaning lady stood rigid, her breath shallow, her eyes fixed on the glittering shards scattered across the marble floor. Every fragment looked like a piece of her future splintered apart. She gripped the sides of her apron, her knuckles white, waiting for the storm that everyone expected. The millionaire's reputation was built on pride and possession, and nothing in his collection held more pride than that ancient vase. Behind her, whispers stirred like wind through dry leaves. Staff pressed close to the doorway, their voices hushed but urgent. It's the vase. She's finished. He'll never forgive that. The words landed heavier than the shards themselves. She felt them settle on her shoulders, crushing her chest until she thought she might collapse. Her body trembled, but she forced herself to stay upright, because even in fear she clung to one small shred of dignity. The millionaire remained crouched for a moment longer, studying the ruin at his feet. His hand lingered on one painted fragment, his jaw set tight. The cleaning lady imagined the scene that would follow. His face rising in fury, his voice booming through the hall, his finger pointing at her like a blade as he declared her unfit, unworthy, dismissed without a second thought. She braced for it, already hearing the echo in her head. The humiliation would be public. The staff would avert their eyes, too afraid to defend her. She would be cast out, her name blackened, her children's lives made harder by one accident she couldn't undo. Her knees shook. She wanted to fall to them, to plead for mercy, to tell him it had been a mistake. But she knew begging would not save her. Men like him valued strength even as they crushed it. So she stood still, the air thick around her, her chest heaving with every breath she tried to quiet. The millionaire straightened slowly, towering above the wreckage, his eyes narrowing on her. She lowered her gaze instantly, unable to bear the weight of his stare. Every second stretched long, torturous, her heart pounding in her ears. She imagined his words already written across her life. Fired. Careless. Disgrace. Her hands clenched tighter against her apron until her nails bit her palms. The staff behind her waited too, the silence oppressive. Some looked away. Others leaned forward with morbid curiosity, wanting to see the explosion unfold. They all knew what he was capable of when his temper was stirred. The cleaning lady prayed for the ground to open and swallow her whole, but no miracle came. Only the moment stretched, heavy, inevitable, until she could almost taste the bitterness of her punishment. It was not the shards on the floor that cut her deepest. It was the knowledge that in this house, one mistake could erase years of loyalty. And tonight, as she stood trembling in the gilded light of the chandelier, she knew she was one breath away from being erased. The black cleaning lady's breath came shallow and uneven as the millionaire's gaze lingered, not on the shattered porcelain, but on her. The silence after the crash had stretched so long that it became almost unbearable. She braced for the inevitable storm, every muscle tensed, yet instead of the explosion she expected, there was stillness. His eyes moved from the jagged fragments scattered like bones across the floor to the lines etched deep in her face, carved by years of labor, by nights spent polishing every corner of his estate while the world slept. He remembered. That was the strange part. He remembered the mornings he would rise early and find the hallways already gleaming, the silver polished until it caught the light like fire. He remembered coming home late from meetings to discover that the carpets were immaculate, the dust gone, the air carrying a faint scent of lavender she always used. He remembered, too, how she never asked for recognition, how she melted into the background of his empire, unseen but indispensable. Now, standing over the ruin of what he had once considered irreplaceable, he saw not negligence but exhaustion, the kind that comes only from devotion stretched too thin. Her eyes, wide with fear, held no defiance. They spoke of a life lived in service, of quiet sacrifices no one in that room had ever paused to acknowledge. The staff waiting in the doorway shifted uneasily, sensing that something unusual was unfolding. The normal order of things, fury, dismissal, disgrace, was suspended, as if the very air held its breath. The millionaire's hand hovered at his side. He could almost hear his own voice rehearsing the words he had always used in moments of imperfection. Careless, irresponsible, unforgivable. But the words refused to rise. Instead, what rose was memory. He saw her years of work, her unbroken presence, the way his house ran like a perfect machine because of her invisible hands. He thought of the vase, treasured though it was, sitting untouched on a pedestal, admired but lifeless. And then he thought of her, moving every day through his world, sustaining it with quiet care. The contrast struck him sharply. The vase had value because others said it did. She had value because she had built it, piece by piece, with labor no one praised. And yet here he was, ready to discard her in an instant while mourning fragments of porcelain. His throat tightened, but no words came. The cleaning lady, sensing the shift, dared a glance upward. His face was not red with rage. It was pale, lined with something that looked almost like doubt. Her fear did not vanish, but a strange calm settled within her. The silence, though heavy, no longer felt like a noose. It felt like a pause, fragile, uncertain, but alive with possibility. For the first time in years, the mansion was not defined by rules of possession or authority. It was defined by that moment, the quiet recognition of humanity between master and servant. The vase was broken, but something else was opening, something no one could yet name. The fragments of porcelain glittered like spilled jewels across the marble floor. All eyes fixed on the millionaire, waiting for the rage that seemed inevitable. Instead, when his voice finally broke the silence, it carried not fury but a steady weight that stunned the room. He did not speak of the vase, of its centuries-old legacy, or of its monetary value. He spoke of people. He said objects, no matter how rare, could always be replaced, but lives could not. His words fell heavy, reshaping the air around him. The staff glanced at one another in disbelief. For years they had known him as a man who measured everything in worth, who displayed his possessions as proof of his success. Yet now, in the aftermath of loss, he placed the woman trembling before him above the broken treasure at his feet. He told them the vase was nothing compared to the hands that had kept his mansion alive, compared to the human being who had worked faithfully under his roof. The cleaning lady's eyes widened. She had expected her world to collapse with the shatter of porcelain. Instead, she felt her breath steady as his words sank in. He ordered the staff to fetch brooms, to sweep away the shards without another word of blame. His tone left no space for whispers of guilt. Then he turned to her directly. His gaze was not warm, but it was honest. He told her she still had her job. That one mistake, no matter how costly, could never outweigh her years of service. The room shifted then. The whispers died. Some of the staff bowed their heads, humbled by what they had heard. Others stared in astonishment, as if trying to reconcile this man with the one they thought they knew. The millionaire, who had always seemed so unreachable, had revealed a truth no one expected to hear in those marble halls. The cleaning lady bent slightly, her hands still trembling against her apron, but her fear began to fade. She was not dismissed, not disgraced. Instead, she stood as proof that even in a world ruled by wealth, humanity could break through, her chest lifted with quiet dignity. The vase had been destroyed, but something else had been restored, a recognition long overdue. The shards were swept away, leaving only polished stone where the pedestal once stood. Guests would later ask about the missing piece, but those who had been present that day would remember the silence, the pause, and the lesson in value that changed how they saw both the millionaire and the woman who worked for him. The cleaning lady's steps echoed softly on the marble floor as she left the room where the priceless vase had shattered. Her knees still trembled, but beneath the shaking there was something steadier, a new current of strength she had not felt before. For the first time in years, she realized that her presence in the mansion was not just as a shadow in the background. She had been seen, not for her mistakes or her uniform, but for her humanity. The staff lingered in hushed clusters, whispering about what had just unfolded. Normally, they would be talking about punishments, about who would be dismissed, about how quickly someone could be erased from the household. But this time, the narrative was different. The man they all feared had chosen to defend her dignity over his pride. They looked at her differently as she walked past, not with pity, but with a kind of cautious respect. She was still the one who swept, polished, and carried burdens no one else wanted, but her role had shifted. She was now the woman who survived the breaking of something worth millions without losing herself. The millionaire himself remained in the drawing room, silent as the shards were swept away. His silence carried weight, but for once, it did not crush. Instead, it seemed to spread a lesson that lingered in the air. Objects, no matter how beautiful, no matter how rare, did not matter as much as the people who moved through the halls every day. The staff, who once avoided eye contact, glanced at her with quiet admiration. They had all been reminded that their value was not tied to the fragility of the treasures around them. As she reached the service wing, she pressed her back against the cool stone wall and let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. Her heart pounded, but not only from fear. It was the rhythm of defiance, of knowing that even in a world built on wealth and power, she had carried herself with dignity that no one could strip away. She thought of how easily she could have been discarded, reduced to a name on a payroll no longer needed. Instead, she had walked out with her head high. In the days that followed, the absence of the vase became a quiet reminder in the mansion. Guests who asked about it were given vague answers, but those who had been there never forgot the true story. The cleaning lady, once invisible, now carried a presence that could not be ignored. The millionaire's household, which had always measured worth in antiques and art, now carried an unspoken understanding that people, even those at the lowest rung, held value that no porcelain could rival. She returned to her duties as always, sweeping, polishing, tidying. But something had shifted. She was no longer only a servant defined by silence and caution. She was the woman who had lived through the shatter of history and walked away stronger. And in that fragile, unexpected moment, the balance of power in the mansion tilted, not in wealth's favor, but in respect's. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. Stories like this remind us that sometimes the smallest actions change everything. Let us know in the comments where in the world you're watching from. We love hearing your city, your country, your corner of the world. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful, unexpected tales. Until next time, stay bold, stay curious, and keep watching.